our proposal, which is definitely a little bit out there, and it's not going to be what you're thinking at all because everybody has been talking about the number of teams that we should put into the playoffs. But what if we looked at it completely differently? What if we didn't set a number of teams, but instead set the requirements? Because in the end, that's what everybody complains about. It's, well, my team should have gotten in because we did this, and the requirements seem to change every year. So what if we just made those the same? In this scenario, there are no conference championships anymore. We don't have that 13th week. If you lose 3 games, you are ineligible for the college football playoff. It's as simple as that. In my opinion, even if you were to lose to 3 top 5 teams, at that point, you're no longer worthy of being a national champion. If you lose 3 games, 3 strikes and you're out. That's my opinion. I honestly think that at no point should we ever see a 3-loss national champion. All 2-loss Power Four and Notre Dame are eligible. So if you 2 games or 2 losses or fewer, if you're Notre Dame or a Power Four team, you are eligible for the college football playoff, as well as the highest ranked Group of Five team. And there will be some sort of minimum strength of schedule rating, so you can't just like schedule all FCS teams in your non-conference to try and make sure you're not losing games. There's still going to be some sort of requirement there. It's too hard for us to try and calculate that right now, but there wouldn't be a way to try and game the system in a sense. So what would this have looked like? This year, it would have been pretty similar to that 14-team playoff. And we'll go through every single year since 2014 and kind of show you what it would have looked like. So this season, there would have been 14 teams which are eligible for our playoffs, and it would have been based on the rankings before conference championship week. So some of the matchups are pretty different. You see Indiana, SMU, Georgia, Arizona State, Iowa State, Notre Dame, Penn State, BYU, Miami, Ohio State, and Boise State, Tennessee. What do you think about this, Connor?
It's very interesting because, like you said, with conference championship week eliminated from this, you have teams like Iowa State that were so good during the regular season not being punished for getting blown out in their conference championship game. They still get a chance to play in the college football playoffs and show that they can win against the top teams. Granted, Notre Dame would be an uphill battle, but they get to prove themselves. That's why you play the game. BYU, same thing after having a starting off 10-0 on, or they start off 10-0 or
Yeah,
9
they
and
did.
0.
It was
10 and
either
0.
9-0 or 10-0. Close enough.
But basically, you started off so dominant, and then you kind of fell down the stretch. But you still get in. You still get a chance to prove that you belong there. It goes for all these teams, like with them being on the bubble, but still meeting these requirements. They get to show that there's a reason why they finished with that record and were in consideration for being
Yeah.
in the playoffs in the other system. But in this system, we're awarding them for based off of how they performed that season, and they get to show what they got.
And we'll see the same basic format of the first round will be played at home stadiums. So Indiana's playing at SMU, Arizona State's playing at Georgia, Iowa State at Notre Dame. You get the picture. And then the quarterfinals will be neutral site games at New Year's Six Bowls. Same with the semifinals. So you still get all of your New Year's Six Bowls. Your bowl contracts are met. So now let's go ahead and move past 2024. What would this have looked like in 2023? Well, we wouldn't have had 14 teams. We would have had 15 teams, which were eligible for the 2023 college football playoffs. And this would have been another incredible bracket.
Yeah, right off the bat, this fixes the probably the most talked about discussion about the college football playoffs and why we went to 12 teams in the first place. Florida State gets to make the college football playoffs. They actually, it worked out. They would have had essentially the ACC championship game from that year. They would have got to play Louisville. Granted, it still would have likely been without Jordan Travis, but they get to show that, hey, we can still win in college football playoff with a backup quarterback. You don't have that issue of did they deserve to get in despite having basically the reason they were so successful drop out with an injury. So that's the biggest thing. But then you get Ohio State, Ole Miss in the picture, Washington, Iowa, Oregon, Oklahoma, Missouri, Alabama. A lot of these top teams get to compete against other top teams to try to progress forward, and Georgia being the number one team going into SEC championship week and losing to Alabama still gets that number one seed for having the best regular season of all these teams.
Yeah, and in this case, they are the only team to get a bye. So let's move on now to 2022. We'll start moving a little bit quicker, and we'll kind of just hit on some of the key years. So 2022 would have been pretty different. Only 11 teams make it in 2022. We see Ohio State and USC just automatically playing each other in the quarterfinals. You got Clemson at Penn State. That would have been an amazing game. Tulane, the best group of five team that year, they get to go play Alabama. They're going to say they want Bama. They're going to get Bama. Washington at Tennessee in order to play Michigan. Another great game there. So 2021, this was the biggest playoffs that we had in this experiment going back to 2014. 16-team playoff. Again, this would have been, I mean, looks amazing. You get 8 home games for all of the top 8 seeds, and then you can still move on to all of your New Year's Six bowl games. Just, I mean, look at some of these matchups.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And another thing about this format is you can still get variations in teams getting in. In this one, you see Pitt got in. Wake Forest got into the playoffs. Granted, they're going to get matched up with the number one seed in Georgia, but they still get in. Oklahoma State gets into this one, having not lost to Baylor in the Big 12 championship game. Baylor still gets in. It still leaves room for variety. You're not always going to have the Ohio States, Alabama's, Georgia's always in. They're going to be one of the higher seeds and probably have the best chance to win the Natty, but you still are going to get variety and chances for other teams to make runs.
And how about in 2021? Obviously, the big story was Cincinnati getting that 4 seed and making the college football playoffs. They now get a home game against Iowa. They have a chance to move on and play in a quarterfinal game against either BYU or Oklahoma State. There's a chance for Cincinnati to really, make a run here, potentially get to the semifinals, that kind of thing. Now, we're going to skip 2020 because it just doesn't even make sense to try and apply this format to a season where nobody even played the same number of games. So we'll go straight to 2019, and boy, is this one interesting.
This is probably what everyone wished happened. If we talked about this entire bracket, we'd probably end up with an LSU Ohio State national championship because you're not going to have that Ohio State Clemson game on the same side. You're going to have probably the rematch of the Natty with Clemson and LSU playing each other, but you get Memphis into this bracket. You get Oklahoma, Alabama, with Alabama having to go on the road. Baylor hosting Penn State, Utah hosting Oregon. There's so many good games in this bracket, and you're probably going to end up with the 2 best teams facing off in the national championship because the only difference with this one is Ohio State won their conference championship, and so did LSU this year. But LSU stomped Alabama, or stomped Georgia, who in this bracket is a 4 seed, whereas Ohio State beat Wisconsin in their conference championship, and LSU was able to leap over Ohio State. But in this one, we're rewarding Ohio State for the regular season. A lot of people say that Ohio State team was one of the best that we've ever seen, and the one of the best that didn't win a national championship because of 2019 Clemson and because they would have gotten that chance to play 2019 LSU with that stacked roster of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and everyone else.
LSU almost for sure wins that national championship, but that's what everybody wanted to see. That would have been just an incredible game because both of those offenses were just amazing. So let's move on to 2018 now. This is our smallest playoffs, where we see only 9 teams make the college football playoff, as you had UCF ranked number 8. This was one of the years where they went undefeated. And just everybody else slots right in, and you only have 9 teams in the college football playoff. But this is still a really good bracket. I mean, Ohio State's going to play Notre Dame, Michigan, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma. Alabama gets the winner of Washington State, UCF, probably the worst game out of all of those. That might as well just put Alabama into the semifinals on this bracket. Just give them a double bye.
Hey, UCF wanted Alabama all of that season. They're gonna finally get Bama, like we said earlier.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and move on to 2017 now. This time we get a 13 team playoff. And you can see the number of teams varies every year. But the thing that doesn't change is the requirements. If you're a 2 loss or fewer Power 4 team or Notre Dame and the best group of 5 team, you are in the college football playoff. There's no, oh, I had the same number of losses and I got left out. Or this team had fewer or had more losses and they got in. It's just a simple requirement, and if you meet it, you're in. It's really really easy. It's as easy as that. So just I mean, some of these matchups are great. You get a rematch of Ohio State, Penn State. Washington's playing at Alabama. UCF at Wisconsin. That probably would have been a really good game in 2017. TCU at Georgia. Hopefully that's a little bit better than 2022. USC at Miami. Auburn gets the 2 seed. I mean, all of these are just amazing.
Yeah, and going back to what you were talking about, because the requirements never change. A lot of people said that just the selection committee themselves is something that needs to be fixed, especially considering that people on the committee are current like heads at certain universities. So you're worried about bias or, oh, I'm going to put in more Big Ten teams because I'm the chairman of some Big Ten school or whatever. This eliminates that bias because you have to follow the requirements. There are like
Yeah,
guidelines for what you have to follow. So you can't say, oh, this team lost to whoever. They lost to this unranked like 500 team. Oh, they don't get in. No, if they have 2 or less losses, meet the strength of schedule requirements, so on and so forth, they get to prove why they belong in the playoffs.
yeah. The college football playoff committee in this case only has 2 jobs. Job number one, seed the teams. Job number two is just picking that highest ranked group of 5 school, which, you can have some arguments there. If there were, say, 2 undefeated group of 5 schools and they both met that strength of schedule requirement we talked about earlier, now you can talk about, okay, maybe we'll throw an extra game in there so we can have both of those teams get in. And you can actually do that. You can just say, okay, we'll have an extra team in the playoffs this year. It's that simple because there's no set requirement and you can have an extra home game. So looking at 2016, this time it's an 11 team college football playoff. You get an undefeated Western Michigan gets to play against Penn State, West Virginia, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Colorado, and then, Michigan, Washington is an automatic quarterfinal mention.
I remember nothing about this year. I didn't even realize that Colorado was a decent team in 2016.
Yeah,
It seemed,
this was one of the Alabama Clemson games. I believe it was Bama Clemson 2. That was the year that I think
yes,
it was Alabama and
because
Washington, and they blew Washington out, and Clemson blew out Ohio State.
yeah,
Yeah. So
correct. Yeah.
then 2015, this time we get a 15 team playoff. Another really interesting looking playoff.
I think the biggest addition on this one is you get the best non-quarterback in college football in 2015 into the playoffs. You get Christian McCaffrey and the Stanford Cardinal into the playoffs. And
Yeah,
they
who
get
knows what they
a
would have done?
exactly they get a home matchup against North Carolina. I mean, Stanford almost did Stanford lose to Michigan State in the Rose Bowl that year? Because this was the year Michigan State beat Ohio State. Ohio State, that was Ohio State's one
I think
loss.
didn't Michigan State get into the playoffs this
Yeah,
season?
they did. They did. I think they played. I thought they played
They played
Stanford at
Alabama.
something.
No, they played
Maybe I'm
Alabama.
thinking of. I think I'm thinking of a different year then.
I think
Um,
you might be. You might be. But just overall, this is, I mean, this just looks like an incredible playoffs, aside from maybe Houston playing at Alabama. That one's tough.
there's
But
so
let's
many
go ahead
Big
and
Ten
take,
teams in here, though.
yeah, oh
Michigan
yeah, that
State,
is really
Northwestern, Iowa, Ohio State. That's
there's
it's
four.
loaded, but like that's the thing.
Yeah.
It
It's
seems
just
like a
not the
lot
ones
more.
you'd
They're all
expect.
crowded around
Yeah.
each other.
Not the ones you'd expect for sure.
Hmm.
So let's look at the inaugural college football playoff now, because there was a lot of debate around this one too, where Baylor and TCU got left out in favor of Ohio State. Now, since all of this is happening before conference championship week, TCU gets a bye. Baylor still gets in. They get to play Wisconsin at home. Ohio State plays Missouri at home. And now they have to play Florida State or Boise State, most likely Jameis Winston and Florida State. But just so many great matchups here. That Mississippi State team that was number one in the inaugural CFP rankings, they get to be in the playoffs now.
Georgia Tech at 10, Arizona at 7. I mean, I don't remember a thing about either of those teams from 2014, but like I said, you get variety. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter how many teams or whatever, as long as they meet the requirements. Like we've been saying this entire time, you just have to meet the requirements and you can get in. So you're still going to have a bunch of new teams make the playoffs every year.
yeah, it just overall, I think that there's going to be a lot of pushback to this like argument from us to maybe not have a specific number of teams. And really the only argument that I can see is the logistics of TV contracts. But if you do it just based on the normal system that like you're still going to have all your New Year's 6 games. So really it's just TV companies are going to be bidding for those home games. And
Mhm.
they won't know how many home games there's going to be until, about 3 weeks before. But that's really something that I don't think would actually be that difficult to work out. The major TV companies are going to have rights to the home games first. There's going to be some sort of list there. Maybe you can do it by conference. The TV company that has a deal with this conference, if that conference gets a home game, they get first dibs on that game. I don't think it would really be that difficult to work out, in my opinion.
Yeah, and now we saw this past year with the 12 team format, but with this format, I think it would get slightly increased. Now you're going to have more competition with the NFL and their playoffs, but I think now, considering you're going to have most likely more home playoff games or just more games in general, I think that's going to be more competition between college football and the NFL. I know a lot of college football fans are very vocal that college football is just straight up better than the NFL, and I might agree with them, but I think having more of these games might lead to more discussions between the two greater organizations, between the NCAA and the NFL, about scheduling, so you don't have those weird overlaps where you're going to have a New Year's Six bowl game on the same day as some other, like a wild card game or whatever conflicts that we had this past playoff.
Yeah, I mean, we saw how interesting the 12-team playoff was this season. And just imagine if you set the requirements first, every single team deserves to be there. You're going to have so many good games, so many matchups that you wouldn't otherwise see. And really, it all is a mystery until we see the very last game. Nothing is certain until then. And I think that's another one of the appeals of this.
It turns into March Madness
Yeah,
without it being 64 teams.
the madness is how many teams there's going to be. So yeah, we want to know if you guys have any suggestions. What do you think of this idea that we just proposed? So go ahead and comment below. We'll respond just like we do on pretty much every video. Make sure to let us know what you think. And anyways, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.